This morning, the committee welcomes Commissioner Werfel back to the Senate to discuss the IRS budget in this filing season, which of course came to a close yesterday. Let me begin by thanking the staff at the IRS for the hard work that made this the smoothest filing season in many years. Democrats made a big investment in taxpayer service with the Inflation Reduction Act, and it goes without saying that now the American people have a right to know what they got with that investment. The numbers paint a clear picture. Last year, the IRS was able to answer 15% of the phone calls it got. This year, it was 87%. The IRS answered 2 million more calls and helped 100,000 more taxpayers in person. The return backlog is now way down. The technology upgrades are helping to get the refunds out the door more quickly. So these are real, concrete improvements. Now, looking ahead, at the top of our agenda needs to be reducing the tax gap. This is money that's owed to American taxpayers and just hasn't been collected. The official estimate says that $540 billion of taxes owed go unpaid every year. Other estimates, including from Donald Trump's IRS commissioner, believe that it could be $1 trillion. These estimates are so far apart because sophisticated, wealthy tax cheats excel at hiding in the shadows. The IRS can't measure the law breaking because it doesn't have all the resources to identify it in the first place. So the bottom line is pretty clear. You cannot get at the tax gap without focusing on these wealthy tax cheats and highly complicated businesses like large partnerships. That's what Democrats have sought to accomplish with the tax enforcement funding in the Inflation Reduction Act. The IRS plan for that funding came out a few weeks ago. I'm sure members have a lot to say about it. It is clear to me that the IRS is focusing on the key issues that the law has subscribed to. The reality is there are big challenges for the Congress to address: shoring up Medicare and Social Security, child care and education for families, paid leave for workers. Both sides have made it clear they want to address the country's fiscal health. Reducing the tax gap helps create the headroom to be able to address those issues. If the first priority is making it harder for wealthy tax cheats to get away with breaking the law, the next priority ought to be to make this tax season filing easier for everybody else. I think we all have heard from our constituents the last few weeks continued stories about how complicated it is, how much time it takes, how many forms. Why is all of this bureaucracy necessary? Now, the Inflation Reduction Act took an important step on an alternative. It's called free direct filing. It would provide another option for taxpayers. And colleagues, it is voluntary. It is something they can choose to have. A voluntary option when they're sick of the hassle and expense that comes with filing online today. There's a study underway looking at how to go about building such a system. Republicans and the tax prep lobby in the past have reacted as if this is just going to be pretty much the end of Western civilization. There used to be bipartisan interest in building a free file system that saved taxpayers and money each year. Making it easier to file was a key component, for example, of the bipartisan tax reform proposal that I wrote with Senator Dan Coates a little more than a decade ago. Seat was right down there. We put together a bipartisan tax reform proposal that included a simplified system should middle-class folks want to choose it. And I am always, colleagues, going to hope that one day we can have another bipartisan proposal to include free file the kind of idea Senator Coates and I pursued for so many years. Unfortunately, these days, too many Republicans are on the side of the big tax prep companies, the big companies that squeeze Americans for billions of dollars each year in various fees and markups. They've even objected to the organization that's conducting the Free File study. I'm sure these legislators would prefer to have the tax prep lobby in charge of studying the issue to smother it from the get-go. It's always been the same pattern. Each time Free File came up, an army of well-paid lawyers and lobbyists descends on Congress to squash it, and too many Republicans stand there, right there with them. This must not be allowed to happen again. Democrats are committed to the proposition that it shouldn't cost hundreds of dollars and many more hours of time simply to follow the law and to pay what you owe. When it comes to filing taxes online, the status quo is unacceptable. So these are some of the agenda items that Democrats are focused on, including reducing the tax gap by going after cheating, by wealthy scofflaws, and making tax filing easier for everybody else. Those are our priorities. Here's some of the things we're seeing from the other side. When they talk about fiscal health, they're talking about giving billionaires a free pass to cheat on their taxes. It's in the proposals. The billionaires get a free pass. Speaker McCarthy works overtime to rally Republicans around a plan that would gut health care and increase hunger among tens of millions of Americans. Apparently, if he doesn't get what he wants, he is willing to let this country go through a catastrophic default. And that is the operative word here, folks, default. There's a lot of lingo about debt ceilings and all these kinds of things. What's really at issue is whether this country is going to get clobbered by a default. The Congress ought to take a smarter approach. That includes making sure the IRS can meet the needs of the American people and enforce the law when billionaires skip out on paying what they owe. So there's plenty to talk about today. I want to thank Commissioner Werfel for joining us again. And as always, Senator Crapo and I try to find as much common ground as we can on these issues. Senator Crapo.